Hello, and welcome to Kidzone. Dreams are a funny thing, aren't they? They don't always make sense. Some are funny, some make you think. Some, when you wake up after them, you're like, what was all that about? Some are forgettable, while some inspire you. Some are very scary. Over the last few weeks, we've been looking at the life of Joseph. Joseph has been treated poorly, hasn't he? And he now finds himself in prison. Last week, Joan and Richard told us of Joseph's time in prison. They likened his experience so far in life to that of a roller coaster with highs and lows. Still, throughout all this, the Bible tells us that God was with Joseph the entire time, working out his plan. We were introduced to two former servants of Pharaoh who had disturbing dreams in which Joseph explained what their dreams meant. However, before he explained the meaning of their dreams, he made the two servants promise that when you are free, remember me, be kind to me, tell the king about me so that I can get out of this prison. I was taken by force from the land of the Hebrews, and I have done nothing here to deserve being put in prison. Eventually, when the two servants were freed, and Joseph's explanation of the dreams came true, the wine servant forgot his promise, resulting in Joseph being left in prison. Have you ever forgotten to fulfill a promise? 2 years later, Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, had two different dreams, which confused him. It unsettled him deep down in his gut. He was so troubled by them, he called all the wise men and his magicians together to help him understand his dreams. But none of them could help him. Guess who piped up then? It was the wine servant. He finally remembered his promise to Joseph. I guess it's better late than never, I suppose. But the wine servant remembered his promise and told Pharaoh of Joseph. Pharaoh immediately ordered his guards to fetch Joseph. And in the Bible it tells us Joseph had to wash and have a shave before meeting Pharaoh. I'm sure after 2 years in prison he was a little bit smelly and hairy. Joseph, now standing in front of Pharaoh, tells Joseph he has had two unsettling and confusing dreams. None of his wise men and magicians have been able to explain and give meaning to his dreams, but he hears that Joseph can help him make sense of them. Joseph here could have said, "Yes, I can," but he didn't. Instead, he said, "I am not able to explain the meaning of dreams, but God will do this for you, Pharaoh." Pharaoh began telling Joseph what he had seen in his dreams, and after the Pharaoh had finished, Joseph began to explain the meaning of both dreams. Joseph explained that the first dream meant that Egypt would have 7 good years, and the second dream meant that they would have 7 bad years after the first 7 good years. How would they have been good and how would they have been bad? Well, Joseph begins by saying, God is showing you, Pharaoh, what he is about to do. Now this was dangerous because Pharaoh thought he was God and the Egyptians thought he was a god too. So Joseph saying his God, the God of the Hebrews, Yahweh, was greater than Pharaoh. And I'm sure there were gasps and shocked faces from the officers and even Pharaoh himself. But Joseph continued to explain the meaning behind Pharaoh's dreams. There will be 7 years where the land will produce good crops. There will be plenty. But once these 7 years are over, the 7 years of drought will begin. No crops will grow, and the people of Egypt, including you, Pharaoh, will feel hunger like you've never felt before. It will be so bad that the people will forget what it was like to have food. And to top it off, Joseph says, God has decided this will happen, and it will happen soon. Here we see two themes intertwined coming together. One being Joseph's trust in God, and two, God working out his plan in Joseph. You see, God is always on time. We see God's plan working out not a moment too soon or a moment too late. When God promises something or says he is going to do something, he does it. He is never late or early. He is always bang on time. We can see that despite Joseph having high and lows, disappointments and hardships, we can see God's plan through it all. Because without Joseph's poor treatment by his brothers, he never would have been sold to Egypt slave traders. Without the Egyptian slave traders selling Joseph to Potiphar, he would never have ended up in Pharaoh's prison. Without Joseph in Pharaoh's prison, he would never have met the two servants and explained their dreams. Without Joseph giving the correct meaning of the two servants' dreams, the wine servant wouldn't have recommended him to Pharaoh to explain his dreams. God's plan was being worked out in all these things, in Joseph's life, in the life of Egypt later on in the story, and the rest of the world. Joseph, a Hebrew and a prisoner, someone who had no right or authority, began to advise Pharaoh on what he should do. Number 1, choose a wise man of understanding to govern the land of Egypt with officers beneath him. And number 2, gather 1/5 of all the crops grown in the first 7 years, in the good years, and store them safely. So we have food to provide for the people and ourselves during the 7 bad years. Now Pharaoh and his officers were impressed and agreed that his plan was a good one. And Pharaoh asked, "But who should we put into this position?" Can you guess who Pharaoh chose? Well, Pharaoh asked his officers, "Can we find a better man than Joseph to take this job? God's spirit is truly in him." But the officers couldn't think of no one else. So Pharaoh turned to Joseph and said, "God has shown you all this. There is no one as wise and understanding as you are. I will put you in charge of my palace. All the people will obey your orders. Only I will be greater than you. I have put you in charge of all the land of Egypt." Pharaoh took off his own ring from his finger with the royal seal and put it on Joseph's finger. He gave Joseph fine linen clothes to wear and put a gold chain around his neck. Pharaoh had Joseph ride in the second royal chariot. Men walked ahead of his chariot calling, "Bow down." By doing these things, the king put Joseph in charge of all of Egypt. Now there are several things we can learn from Joseph's story so far. Number 1, during the hard times, Joseph was never bitter or mad at God. He probably had questions, but Joseph trusted God in good times and the hard times. God took care of him because God had a plan and was working it out. Number 2, in our lives, we may have friends or family that are going through hard times, or it could be family members and friends who are making our lives a little difficult. But nevertheless, we can help them see, and we can have confidence and know personally for ourselves that God is with us and cares for us during hard times. Just like God took care of Joseph, he will help us through the hard times. And then number 3, Joseph gave God all the credit, because without God, he wouldn't have been able to understand the dreams. All help comes from God, and Joseph gave God all the credit, and even gave the credit to God in front of Pharaoh. I have put a document with several questions for you to discuss with your mum or your dad over lunch, and just to unpack this story a little bit more. But also there is a colouring sheet for you to download on our website. Bye for now.